Welcome back to Briggs on Books, where we meet authors and talk to authors from all over the world about not just their books, but their process. How did they come up with their ideas? Better yet, how did they finish writing a book? Because I always say anybody can write a book, but few people can finish writing a book. And our next guest has done just that. And this is fascinating. This is going to be a fascinating book. Let me find him. There he is, Nick Parisi. Welcome, Nick Parisi. By the way,
hey, thank you for having me.
I see the cover behind you, but I'm going to show the viewers the cover up close. Mafia Confessions, King of Bootleggers Murder. And I asked you, first thing I asked you, is this a true story? Tell us about it, Nick.
Yeah, it is a true story. It's about my grandfather when he came over here from Calabria, Italy, early 1900s. And he got involved in the bootleg industry, along with a lot of other ethnic groups back in 1920. And there was a murder. And while he was sitting in his jail cell, he wrote a diary. And between that and a lot of interviews with the newspapers of the time, there was just a huge story out there. Somebody even made a documentary about it, a little bit about it recently. And just I started exploring more about it and decided to write a book about it, get the true story out.
I was surprised to hear the setting. What town was this in?
This is in Springfield, Massachusetts. It's where I grew up. I actually grew up in the same house of all my relatives since 1900. And yeah, it's a small city, maybe 45 minutes west of Boston. But it's a huge mafia enclave for the Genovese crime family of New York.
See, I would never, we always think of mafias in New York or Chicago or something like that, but Springfield, Massachusetts?
Yeah, Springfield, Massachusetts, and I'm actually writing a book right now about the current mafia. There's a lot of mob hits going on right now. Wow. A lot of informants, and yeah, it's a big faction of the Genovese crime family.
Now, this seems like, the reason why I asked if it was real, it's because it was so detailed. You must have had to do a ton of research. Tell me about that part of it.
Yeah, definitely a ton of research. Probably 150 newspaper articles were written about this story back in the 1920s. And since there was no TV back then,
yeah,
when somebody got interviewed in the newspaper, it might be 2-3 pages long. And they print it word for word, the conversation back and forth between the reporters and the subject they're interviewing. The court testimonies between the attorneys and the judge and my grandfather, the defendant, the witnesses. I have everything word for word. Wow. So when I wrote this book, I didn't have to add any filler to it. Yeah. I have the exact words that people said back and forth. I would say the book is 97% true, actual conversations, actual facts of what happened. I barely had to add anything to fill in anything.
Now, how did you know this about your family as you're growing up and became an adult?
Yeah, the mafia is very prevalent in my area, and my family was involved all the way up until modern times. So it's this story is very well known throughout the Springfield area. It's a famous mob hit. It's the first mob hit in the area. And because of this mob hit, the Genovese crime family was able to come into Massachusetts from New York. And, Vito Genovese, very famous individual, mob figure, it's what brought them to Springfield, Mass. And they're still controlling things up in Massachusetts right now.
So was this your grandfather or great-grandfather?
This is my grandfather.
And did he have your name?
Yes. Well, pretty close. Joe Parisi.
Okay.
Giuseppe Anthony Parisi. Everybody in my family has Anthony either as a first or middle name. But, yeah, his name was Giuseppe Joseph Anthony Parisi.
Yeah, I just can't wait to get into this. What are the formats? Is it audiobook?
I have everything. It's I have audiobook. I had a great narrator. Mr. Giorgio, he excellent, the accents. He went back and forth between like a Kennedy accent, for the attorneys, right, to the Italian, right off the boat accent. He did a great job. That's on iTunes and Audible, ebook, paperback, hardcover. My website, you can order a book and I'll sign it and personalize it for you. So it's available everywhere. Every bookstore, Barnes and Noble, everywhere.
Whenever I could order directly from the author, I love to do that. Kind of cut out the middleman, so to speak. And
and I definitely appreciate it too. Let's not, Amazon makes enough money, but it's also available there.
Well, the reason I ask about audiobook at my age is harder and harder to read those small letters. I've been just shifting over to audiobooks and getting through so many more books, so that'll be exciting to do that too.
Yeah, definitely.
By the way, what was your career? Maybe I shouldn't ask you that.
Well, you can ask me. It's kind of funny because I consider myself a modern day bootlegger. Just like my grandfather, my uncles, my aunts. There was prohibition of alcohol, and I live here in California along with you, and we had the prohibition of marijuana, cannabis, and I got involved heavily in that about 18 years ago, before it was legalized, when it became medicinal, and all the way up until licensing. So I was a modern day bootlegger, just like my family.
That's a great parallel, by the way. Now, what years were these things happening in your grandfather's day?
Well, he came over to America around 1905, along with his brothers and sisters, his parents. They all came, within a few years of each other. He was the third person to come over, and so we're talking about 1905. Well, Prohibition hit 1920. And that's when alcohol became illegal in America, and that's when all the bootlegging started, and that's where the story really takes place. But I do spend quite a bit of time educating people about, why the Italians came to America during that time. They're from Calabria, which is southern Italy, very poor area, devastated by earthquakes and a tsunami at the time. And, during that disperse of Italians, I think they lost like 40% of their entire population.
Wow. Left
the country. It went to, everywhere, including America, because of all those conditions and the poverty.
That part of the book would make a very interesting study as well.
Yeah. I learned a lot myself. It was just, everything that was going on back then. And they came to America and, for the land of opportunity. And, being Italians, they didn't speak the American language, the English, and they didn't get all the good jobs like people that could speak English. So they were, digging the ditches and, working on the railroads and stuff like that. My grandfather was making $1.58 a week at the time for 60 hours work.
Wow.
A couple pennies, an hour,
Does the famous bootlegger Joseph Kennedy pop up in your book?
He doesn't, but there's plenty out there. I had my book up to 500 pages, and I had to cut out 150 pages. So I don't want to get into Kennedy because that's a whole book by itself.
Another book by itself. Well,
and I have plenty more. I have plans for. So
I love crime and mafia type of novels, but I love nonfiction, and if I get a history like this, I will devour it. So I'm very excited about that.
I'm the same way. I right next to me, I have a whole stack of books. I probably have 20 mob books, true crime. I haven't even started yet. Yeah. I can't read them all and write, at the same time. But there's so many great true crime books out there, mob books.
Well, I have a saying, ABR, always be reading. So that's where audiobooks have helped me. When I'm at the gym, when I'm at the grocery store, I'm devouring another book. So I'm going to move yours way up on the list because it's audio. So thanks.
Sure. I'll send you a code for a free one, too.
Oh, that would be great. That even makes it better. Get you up higher on the list. Hey, Nick, we are way out of time, but I just want to give you a minute. Is there anything else you want our viewers to know about you or your book?
Yeah, as we know, we didn't really talk about the book, but I'm actually going to be at the Mob Summit in Las Vegas. I'll be talking to all the mafia enthusiasts, along with a bunch of famous, people in the mob world. And I'm writing a new book right now called City of Betrayal that continues on with this book and goes up to 2010. It's kind of the same people, but all their grandsons and are involved in the current mafia. Wow. It's the same families.
You don't get in trouble for writing that stuff?
I'm actually friends with everybody. I just
Okay.
went back to Springfield a couple weeks ago and I interviewed all of them. Some became informants, some are in prison, some
Yeah.
spent 20, 30 years in prison, and they can talk about the crimes because they've already been convicted or other of it.
Did you know your grandfather?
Until I was 10 years old,
Okay.
yeah. He owned Parisi's Market at the end of my street. And, that's where we got all our, grocery goods, the little Italian market at the end of the street.
Yeah. How fun. Nick, I got to have you back again and again. This is fascinating, and you're fascinating too. And I just love how much research you did because that makes books way better.
Yeah, thank you. I put a lot of work into it, and a lot of people that know the history, genealogists for mafia stuff, they commended me on how well the book is done and how good it is and how correct it is.
Yeah, and especially the part that we probably didn't know about is the Italy days and the tsunami and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of good stuff in there. I had a 100-year-old made member of the mafia. He's still alive, the oldest mob member alive, and it was his uncle that got killed, and he was a little boy when it happened. And he said the book was great.
that's
And it's
great.
about his family getting, shot.
All right, Nicholas, thank you so much for sharing this with us and for writing the book.
All right, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Important piece of history, I think. We'll be back with more authors right after this.